Worker bumblebees are independent foragers, but live in colonies together, so if a bee gets lost, it affects the entire colony. The young depend on these worker bees to bring back food to the colony in order for the colony to survive. According to a study conducted in 2004, chemical insecticides play a role in crop productivity in intensive farming systems, preserving roughly 1/5 of crop yields. Neonicotinoids are a main group of insecticides. These pesticides are systemic, meaning that they affect the entire tissue of the plant they are treating, making them an effective method of pest control. The most common neonics used on crops are imidacloprid, thiamethoxam, and thiacloprid. Neonics are affecting the crops that bumblebees are pollinating. Bumblebees are valued as pollinators, given that they guarantee the pollination of various crops, such as peppers, cabbage, carrots for seeds, cucumbers, kiwi fruits, strawberries, cranberries, blueberries, and tomatoes for fruit. One way bumblebees accomplish this is through a process called buzz pollination, especially for tomatoes. During this process, the vibration of the bees' flying parts causes a discharge of pollen from the flowers. Bumblebees can accomplish pollination under cooler temperatures and lower light levels as compared to honeybees. In the field, trace levels of neonics could be found in the pollen and nectar that bumblebees are exposed to during foraging. This concern has sparked the interest of scientists over the past decade to conduct studies to observe the effects of neonicotinoids on bees even though they are not targeted by the insecticide. With the majority of studies conducted on honeybees, the effects also need to be observed in bumblebees since they are valued pollinators as well. Bumblebees are a native species to North America. A common bumblebee species is Bombus terrestrius, also known as worker bee. These bees live in colonies and are responsible for the amount of food that is brought back to the colony. This process is extremely important to the success of the entire colony. Most of these studies have observed the effects of neonics on individual bees rather than the entire colony. Results showed that the sublethal effects of neonics are in fact more problematic to the bumblebee colonies than the rarely observed lethal effects. Sublethal effects have more profound implications on the colony level. Behavior tests have observed effects of neonics on 4 main categories listed in order of importance: foraging for reproduction, orientation and learning impairments, growth and development, and finally mortality. It is important to note that not all behaviors will be affected equally. Studies have shown that impairments to foraging have negative effects on reproduction. This is because foraging adults cannot find their way back to the colony, and thus cannot bring back food to the developing babies. So foraging is an important component of the reproductive success of the colony. This study reported Bombus terrestrius colonies a loss of 10% in worker survival and a significant decline of about 40% in the numbers of adults produced upon exposure to imidacloprid in the syrup and pollen. Another study simulated the exposure of bumble colonies to a crop of flowering oilseed rape treated with the imidacloprid. After exposure, these colonies saw a reduced nest growth and an 85% decrease in queen production compared to control colonies. Impairments to learning ability are also important to note, since worker bees rely on their visual learning capacity to know and remember the distance and the direction to the food source. The majority of studies were conducted under lab conditions, which allow scientists to monitor and control particular variables that are much more difficult to monitor under field conditions. These experiments focus on the effects of neonics on individual bees rather than the entire colony. In the lab, single doses of the pesticide were used compared to the multiple dose exposures witnessed in the natural field conditions. Also, the distance of foraging is much shorter in the lab than the distance observed in the field. According to the meta-analysis conducted by Cresswell, there are several difficulties associated with conducting field tests. Scientists have difficulty monitoring all life stages of the bees. Other environmental stressors such as disease and starvation are present that may counter the effects of neonicotinoids. Scientists have limited control over feeding, so they can't control the dosage of neonics the bees receive. Studying the effects of neonics on the entire colony is not a problem associated with field tests. Worker bumblebees were the main subject of these studies. However, almost nothing is known about the impact of neonics on the behaviors of other wild pollinators such as birds, butterflies, beetles, and bats. This could have further implications on crop yields. Due to the increased awareness of the harmful effects on pollinators, Congress is currently in the process of reviewing an act that involves the use of neonic pesticides. This act is titled Save America's Pollinators Act. The Act focuses only on native pollinators, and its goals include suspend registration of neonics, monitor the health status of native bees, identify causes of unusual mortality of bees. In conclusion, the overall decrease in pollination due to the effects of neonics can reduce crop yields and in turn negatively affect our growing population.